Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today, we just want to remember Dan Markel. We have some YouTubers here who have graciously agreed to help read victim impact statements. So first we have Dawn. Dawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, it's Dawn here. It's good to see you on this kind of solemn day. I kind of feel sad about this in a lot of ways
Mhm.
because I've been thinking about it all week and thinking about what it must be like for Dan's family. And I do remember when you interviewed Ruth about a week or two ago, she mentioned that they have like a whole week of activities planned for remembrance of Dan's death. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
because I think the actual, did they call it the yard site, was July 6th.
right,
So it's
right.
been a whole week and a half of tons of YouTube channels focusing on the case, which is always a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Mhm. Great. So, what
So,
would you like to tell us about yourself?
oh, about myself, well,
Yeah.
I have a channel too. It's right here.
Hmm.
And I cover some trials and I cover NFL football. So I have a separate podcast for that. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, but I love all football. I actually did watch the World Cup today. I don't know if anyone else watched that.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And then I have a skincare class. It's aloe vera based skincare. So I have like three different things on my channel. So there's something for everyone.
Mhm. That's great. Well, Julia
Yeah.
would like you to turn up your volume if there's a
Alrighty.
way to do so,
It
or
should
speak
be
closer to
it
the
should
mic.
be all the way up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hmm.
Yes. Okay, just
If I
speak
test that.
closer
Yeah.
if possible. Okay, and then next we have Patty, the lynch mob president. Um,
Hi, everybody. I am Patty N, and my claim to fame is I was a dental hygienist for Harvey Adelson a long time ago. And Judy interviewed me because of that. And somehow it turned into my channel, which is just a very small, I say I'm a content creator because I still don't feel like it's real, but I kind of just jumped into it because I love talking about the case. I'm just obsessed with this case. I stand completely in solidarity with the Markels in wanting full justice, not partial.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of like Dawn. Reading these letters is like bittersweet. They're interesting, but it's just so sad. It's just so sad. But anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Judy.
sure. And so Patty and I met because you reached out to me and you just texted me out of the blue. So I was kind of taken aback. I was like, oh no, how'd they find my phone number? Because I didn't know if you were some crazy person.
Judy, I remember how that happened. I had something happen in your chat. I was a moderator and I didn't know how to handle it. And two people started griping. They're leaving your channel and they're going to unsubscribe. And I was like horrified. I was hurting your channel. And so
Oh,
I looked up your phone number and I didn't even know if it was a desktop phone or just in case. I just said, I'm so sorry this happened. I'm going to sign up my husband, my daughter. I'm going to get you.
oh, thank
Aw.
you.
And you're so gracious. You said, they're not worth having anyway, then.
Well, thank you, Patty. Yeah, so Patty and I met in person for the first time last year at Donna's trial. So we
Yeah.
wound up rooming together. So it's been great getting to know you guys thanks to Dan Markel's case and YouTube. Yeah. And Patty, you
Nice.
didn't actually know Dan Markel, right?
Right. I never met him.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
you met
because
all
you
of the
knew them
Adelsons.
years and years ago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, when I knew Wendy, she was 7 years old. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say three again, like I did on your initial interview. I just,
Yeah.
well, they babied her. They held her by the hand and she just looked all
She was
dolled up.
Younger.
treated like a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Hmm.
cool. Well, thank you for being here. And then Attorney Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm attorney Ben. I'm a attorney in New York City. My practice focuses mostly on business, bankruptcy, restructuring, corporate workouts. But I kind of got my start on YouTube actually because of the Dan Markel case. I remember how I first got interested in it was I'm actually grew up originally in South Florida. So I'm a big South Florida sports fan. Unfortunately, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, long suffering. But I always looking at the Miami Herald, looking at the sports section. And I remember once, I guess, reading the news and scanning my eye, and I saw this story about this law professor who was shot dead in his driveway. And I'm like, well, it just seems so weird. And I just kept like monitoring the story and then there were no weeds for a long time. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then a friend sent me the Wondery podcast, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I couldn't stop listening. I listened to the whole thing. And then I got into Surviving the Survivor. I was watching his channel. And then kind of on a whim, I decided to record a video about Donna Adelson and about her restitution, and could she hide her assets to get out of paying restitution. And suddenly the video kind of blew up and got all sorts of views. And that was kind of the beginning of my YouTube journey. So it's a little bit about me.
Yeah. And we also met with Joe Patuto and Kathy from Gossip Rumor Innuendo when I went to New York City a couple of months ago. So that was great to meet you, even though I didn't get to talk to you that much, though. Yeah.
No, it's great seeing everyone in person. You know, we see each other on a camera. It's nice to see you in real life.
Yeah. Well, quick question before we start reading. Julia wants to know, Patty, does Harvey seem different from when you knew him?
Holy cow. Night and day. I'm telling you, the man I saw speak at Donna's sentencing, full of vitriol and hate, blaming the victim's parents, that's not the man I knew. The man I knew was happy-go-lucky. He was friendly. He always had a smile on his face. He was just so cheerful. So, no, that's not the man I knew. Wow. Nope.
Well, but back then, did he seem very protective of Wendy and his kids in general?
He didn't really talk about them much, but he just loved Donna. He had her picture behind the desk, and you could just tell he was just gaga for Donna. And
he still is.
He was friendly. He was happy-go-lucky, but he did have I don't want to say a vicious side, because sometimes in business you have to make tough decisions. But I thought he was really cutthroat in some of his business decisions. And then also I have to recognize that he brought 2 kids to my wedding who weren't invited, and he would do things like that regardless of how it affected someone else. So like rules didn't apply to them. I can see it more now.
Yeah. So no one beats the Adelson family, right? So they seem very full of themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so since we have a ton of reading, maybe we can just go ahead and jump in here. I'll put it up on the screen if it looks okay. So Dawn, will you be the first one to read this?
Yes, I am going to read the first one that wasn't read at any of the trials to our understanding. It's Amelie von Briesen, a friend of Dan's. So let me scroll back.
Thank you.
Okay. And this is addressed to the Honorable Robert Wheeler. So that tells us when it was. It was back during the 2016.
Katie's trial, 2022.
Trial, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, can I interrupt, Dawn? Your voice is still very soft. The volume.
I don't understand that because I checked the volume. That's very strange. I've not had that problem. Well, I can take my mic off and just go with my.
Maybe can you hold it closer? Or... Yeah.
Now you're muted. Oops. You're muted.
Yes, I know. I was just changing my.
That's good.
That's good. I just turned my mic off because I don't know. I've never had that happen before, but okay. Never had that. Okay, so you can hear me okay now?
Great. Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Without the mic. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. So sorry. All right. So again, to the Honorable Robert Wheeler, dear sir, I remember when I first heard the news that Danny had been shot. I was standing at my kitchen sink washing my napping toddler's sippy cups when the call came in. In disbelief, I turned around and I called my college roommate to say, "Oh my God, something's happened to Dan. I think he's dying." The horror of those moments has only been eclipsed by the true story of Dan's stalking and murder have come to light. As we have learned, the gruesome, greedy details of his final moments in pain and suffering, murdered solely because he loved his boys, Link and Ben, so much. I first met Dan in 1991 during the first weeks of our freshman year of college at Harvard, where we lived across the yard from one another. He formed an immediate impression: sunny, happy, charming, a smart aleck, nerdy guy who really couldn't take himself too seriously, yet had every reason to do so. He was brilliant, and he was the most personable kid I had met that year. We tagged each other over the course of the next few years. Dan dedicated to the study of law, of righteousness and justice, me circling the same, but more interested in a life working towards human and civil rights. Summers in Cambridge, Dan gathered friends together, hanging out in the garden of the house he was sitting that summer. "Marty Peretz won't mind," he'd say. "Stay a little longer." And we'd stay a while longer, not wanting to leave his or the evening's golden glow. I'm having a hard time keeping tears back.
I know. Yeah.
A few years
Oh.
later, Dan welcomed me to law school with his same boundless enthusiasm. He'd gone a couple of years ahead of me, and he was eager to convince me to try out for the law review, to advise on course, to introduce me to his friend Steve, Justice Breyer now, to debate some
Wow.
convoluted point of law or other. We'd adventure a bit around campus, and Dan would do his best to dispel my first year insecurities, to convince me that not only did I belong here, I could thrive. And it is this Dan that I missed the most. A big-hearted, generous, most encouraging genius who was convinced that we all had value, that we all had something worthy of contributing to not just the academy, but the world beyond. Always kind, always doing his best to convince others to believe in themselves as much as he did. That is Danny in my mind, and I miss him so. Years down the line, after I returned from work overseas, Dan and I started catching up on some of his famous phone calls. Amy, he'd say, "You've got to." And he'd go on to try to convince me to reach for my dreams and to write some article or another, apply to law professorships, to break out of my single parent shell. Because in that area, Danny came before me a few years too. His boys are just a couple years older than my own. And my ex walked out on me just a short while before his, similarly pursuing a highly contentious custody battle. We commiserated our losses, compared notes, and we were astonished at the surreality of our situations. And we treasured our babies. I do not know if I have ever heard anyone treasure their time with their boys as much as Danny did. He was his old, effusive self to a factor of infinity, so utterly in love with these two magical creatures he'd helped create. I cannot think of their loss. It is so great as to be actually completely unimaginable. Similarly, I do not know how Danny's wonderful family continued to bear this excruciating ordeal and this heartbreaking loss. I miss Danny incredibly. I didn't discover until years after his death that he'd consider me a freshman year crush. How blind I was. So sorry, Danny. That's in parentheses. And I have missed his encouragement, support, and words of wisdom as I have struggled to find my feet again as a single mom on my own. I never did manage to hit the academic job market. In parentheses, I do believe had he not been killed, he would have gotten me there eventually. And I think often of where he'd be, where we'd all be, had he been allowed to live. I still cry for him, his boys, whom he loved so deeply, and for the collective loss we have all suffered. When I think of what could have been, sometimes the tears come when I'm at my sink, looking out the window, just as I was those years ago when we had first heard the awful news. There never was, and there never again will be, another like him in this world. Respectfully yours, Amalie von Briesen.
Thanks, Dawn. Okay, so some of these pages are
Oh, I see. I was just reading.
duplicates. Yeah. Okay, so this
Okay,
is the next one.
I have a letter to the Honorable Judge Hankinson, and hold on, I'm scrolling. It is from Barbara Rose Poulter of Toronto in Ontario.
Yes.
Okay. To the Honorable James C. Hankinson, I have known the Markel family since the summer of 1978 when they moved from Montreal into the house directly next door to mine in Toronto. Our families became fast and everlasting friends. Shelley is to this day my oldest and dearest friend. Since we were 8 years old, our lives have been intertwined. Shelley and I attended the same schools, summer camps, and universities. We had our children at the same time, and they attended school together as well. We have been very fortunate to maintain such a rich and loving friendship over the last 42 years. Danny left Toronto for university in 1991. Although I didn't see him often, we stayed in touch over social media as well as during the many visits he made to Toronto. He always made an exceptional effort to keep in touch with all of his friends and family. Despite the geographic distance between Shelley and Danny, their relationship remained strong. As their families grew, Danny made a concerted effort to ensure that his children knew their family in Toronto because family was so important to Danny and the Markels. Danny was determined to keep the bonds strong and often brought his family to Toronto for a week at a time. In the spring of 2014, Danny brought his children to Toronto to spend Passover together with his whole family. I bumped into him in the foyer of the school that both my children and Shelley's children attended. Danny was very much looking forward to surprising his nieces and nephew at pickup time with his presence. We chatted for a while as we waited for the kids to emerge from the school. He asked with genuine interest for updates about my family. He then told me about the tough time he was experiencing at home with his divorce proceedings. It was obvious that he was working through some very trying situations, but nonetheless, he was firm in his commitment to his children and their well-being. I was truly impressed by the love and devotion he had for his children, and it was clear that they were his most treasured possession. He alluded to the difficulties that the Adelson family were creating in trying to reconcile the various agreements. Despite these troubles, there was nothing that would stand in the way of him being with his children, providing them with the love, care, and education that he was so very passionate about. Upon Danny's death a few months later, I watched the demoralizing effect it had on his family and particularly my friend Shelley. Throughout her life, Shelley was an emotionally strong, resolved, and focused person. She was the one I would always turn to in my moments of difficulty. However, the media attention, endless questions about Danny's murder, and protracted legal proceedings have worn on Shelley and her family. Their emotional fatigue became clear to me. I had not seen this before from Shelley. Moreover, all this uncertainty about the trial and its outcome has forced Shelley to put many things in her own life on hold, and this has worn on her greatly. Over the past few years, the Markel family has continuously made efforts to see the boys, send gifts, call or or FaceTime on birthdays and Jewish holidays, but their attempts have been unsuccessful. The frustration the Markel family has had to endure because of their inability to connect with Danny's children has been clear and hard to watch. For the Markels, family is and always will be so important. Danny's boys are a critical part of the Markel family, but they no longer carry the family's name. They no longer know the family as it has been almost 3.5 years since they interacted with Shelley and her family. They no longer have their aunt, uncle, grandparents, and first cousins to know and love. Shelley and her family are heartbroken by this reality. The impact of this situation has been significant and will be lasting for Shelley, the Markel family, and ultimately Danny's sons. Sincerely, Barbara Rose Poulter of Canada.
Thanks, Patty.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ben will read the next one. Okay, so they repeated that same letter. Okay.
Okay, so it's from Adam Berger and Stephen Frank of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Okay. Dear Judge Hankinson, in Jewish tradition, there's a legend that someone who successfully matches 3 people with their future spouses earns a place in heaven. There are various explanations for this story. One is that God matched Adam with Eve, so that bringing spouses together is doing God's work. In a life cut far too short, Dan and Markel made 2 successful matches. We are one of them. We each met Dan in the first few days of college. Adam lived 2 flights below Dan in his freshman dorm. Steve met Dan through his own freshman roommate. For each of us, our first conversations with him stand out in our memory. He wanted to know everything about us, where we grew up, how many siblings we had, what their names were, what our interests were, what we wanted to do with our lives. In the space of a few hours, it seemed as though he knew everything about us. He remembered all of it. We each built strong, independent friendships with Dan, but he didn't actually introduce us until the end of that first year in college. It wasn't with the goal of making a match. This was the early 90s. Both of us were deeply in the closet, and the notion that we could be a couple was the furthest thing from our minds. But Dan somehow sensed that we would be great friends, and it was with that in mind that he brought us together. Over the next couple of years, the 3 of us became an inseparable group. Senior year, we all lived together, and we remained in close touch after graduation, even as Dan went off to Israel and then England on postgraduate fellowships. Steve went to study in Germany, and Adam moved back to New York City. It was in that year, 1996, that the 2 of us finally became a couple. We've been together ever since. We remember the joy on Dan's face when we shared our news. We were, of course, nervous about telling him. How would he react to the fact that the 2 of his closest friends were gay and dating each other? But for Dan, the fact that we had found happiness was all that mattered, and he thought it was hilarious. He had quite literally matched Adam and Steve. At our wedding in 2006, Dan danced and celebrated with unbridled enthusiasm. He was part of the small crew who lifted our chairs and held them aloft as we celebrated another Jewish tradition. On the video, which we've watched again and again in the years since his death, you can see his happiness. This is how we will remember him. Over the next few years, with our lives centered in New York and his in Tallahassee, we saw less of Dan. Still, our friendship endured as we each welcomed children into our lives. One of our last visits with Dan was in Cambridge in May 2013. We had just moved here to take new jobs, and Dan's visit coincided with our oldest son's 4th birthday party, which meant we didn't have much time to spend with him. They joined the party, mingling with other preschool parents and having a grand time, even though he didn't know anybody, and the occasion was marked by sing-alongs and cupcakes rather than grown-up conversation. Dan took so much pride in the fact that we had children because for him, children were life's greatest gift. Dan's love for his 2 boys was obvious and overwhelming. It defined him. They were the central focus of his life. One of the greatest tragedies of Dan's death is that those boys are now being raised by the very people who conspired to have him murdered, and who are working every day to erase his memory from their lives. We hope they do not succeed. We always imagined we would have Dan with us over the decades, challenging us and cheering us as we move through the stages of our lives. We expected more visits, more meals, more stories. We look forward to telling our kids how Dan brought us together and telling Dan's kids silly stories about his college hijinks. We look forward to one day comparing notes with Dan as our children started college and formed adult friendships of their own, and perhaps attended the weddings of each other's children. None of this will come to pass, nor did Dan ever have the chance to make his third match, though we have little doubt he would have. But as abbreviated as Dan's life was, we know that God saw the white in his beautiful soul and how our Dan worked to repair our broken world. We know that Dan earned his place in heaven. Dan's academic study was justice, a topic that was at the core of his being. Writing about justice fused his passion for Jewish study, his instinctive sense of right and wrong, and his love of argument and debate, as well as is the white in taking provocative stands. It saddens us beyond measures that the subject to which Dan devoted his academic life now hangs over his death like an inescapable shadow. Will there be justice in our lifetimes for Dan? Will there be appropriate punishment for the people responsible for taking the life of our friend? Will there be some consequence that deters others from committing such heinous crimes? We ask your honor to do everything in your power to answer those questions with a definitive yes. Sincerely, Adam Berger, Stephen E. Frank.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, that's interesting that these friends already suspected that the Adelsons had something to do with his death because this was written back in 2019, I assume, because it has to do with Garcia and Meg Panwa's trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So way back then, they already knew.
Yeah.
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 Very, very profoundly
frustrating.
written.
Yeah.
Just like Dan's great uncle, Ruth's uncle. He knew immediately.
All right. It was the in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So this next one is from 2022. So
Right.
Dawn?
So this is from Karen Cyphers, who many of us are familiar with, and this is to Judge Wheeler again. And she writes, Judge Wheeler, I write to share the impacts of Dan Markel's life and murder on me. His children and mine are the same ages and would attend the same Tallahassee Jewish community events. If there was something to celebrate, Dan was there with Benjamin and Lincoln. He brought an infectious energy for observing the passages of life, fully present in mind and spirit. He showed up in joyful moments and times of sorrows, modeling for his sons and for the rest of us too, what it means to live a life oriented toward reverence, thoughtfulness, and justice. And while he did so, a woman he had never met, Catherine Magbanwa, was quietly plotting how to kill him. I observed the unmistakable value of his life brought to the communities he chose and have seen the devastation his murder delivered just the same. I witnessed up close the heartbreaking grief of some of those closest to him whose sense of loss is profound and lasting. There is a missing space where Dan, Benjamin, and Lincoln once joined in. Dan had so much left to create and give. Uncountable lives have been forever changed for this selfish, terrible act. Respectfully, Karen Cyphers.
Okay, now I have one from Lisa Haupterhot. I'm not sure to say that. This is to the Honorable Stephen Everett regarding the state of Florida versus Charlie Adelson. It has taken me a long time to write this letter. Every time I start, I become very emotional. I know to the world, Danny was an academic, a professor, and an intellect. But to me, Danny was my cousin and my friend. The memories that I have with Danny are all filled with warmth and love. Every time he walked into a room, he brought light and love with him. He was the most devoted father to his two boys, Benjamin and Lincoln. He was a loving son to my aunt and uncle, Ruth and Phil, and an incredible brother to my cousin Shelley. He had a very special bond with all his nieces and nephews, and he really was an incredible friend to all. My times with Danny are not remembered by his academic excellence and achievements, although they were beyond impressive. My memories of Danny are from our family get-togethers, dinners, and celebrations. He was always the life of the party, always singing and dancing and smiling. Our Passover cedars were one of his favorite family gatherings. He would never miss it. Regardless of which part of the world he was in, whether Israel or Cambridge or Washington or Tallahassee, he always found a way to be there. That's how important family was to him. As much as I miss Danny, the fact that I do not know his boys and that they aren't able to attend all our family gatherings makes this emptiness in my heart that much more profound. Danny was loved by all. He was loved by me. Danny is missed by all. He is missed by me. I pray that justice will prevail, will finally prevail. I pray for my family to eventually find some form of peace. Lisa Haupt.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah,
Yes.
it's good to remember that it's not just Dan's parents who suffered, but a huge
Right.
extended
Yeah.
family. Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. A large community. And we're only probably going to hear from a tiny, teeny, itsy bitsy fraction, right? There's probably hundreds of people
Yeah.
whose lives been touched
Yeah.
by him. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
I can say that the Jewish culture is very family oriented, and you always have, like they mentioned, the Passover Seder's in particular time when you have family of multiple generations together, an extended family, and for them to just have Danny missing is just unimaginable.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Much less being killed by his own,
Yeah.
family by marriage. It's pretty
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like to go ahead then?
Sure. So this is Michael Cahill, president of Brooklyn Law School. To Judge Hankinson. Dear Judge Hankinson, I am writing to offer a victim impact statement on behalf of Dan Markel in relation to the above noted cases. This was Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua. To me, Dan was a fellow legal scholar who over time became a treasured intellectual colleague and ultimately a dear friend. I know I am only one of many people whose relationship with Dan followed that same trajectory. Dan and I started our academic careers around the same time. I met him in 2005 at a conference for 4 junior criminal law professors where he was presenting a draft article. When it turned out he would never publish, though he worked on it from time to time over the next decade. Worrying over and revising a draft until he was entirely satisfied was typical Dan, though somehow it didn't impede his output. I've never met a scholar so exacting who was also so productive. The paper, the presentation, and most especially his interaction with questioners highlighted traits I would come to associate with Dan as a thinker. Bold, thorough, dogged in defending his position, yet genuinely interested in hearing concerns and restrictions that might help him refine or improve it. We grew closer as our careers progressed, and for several years we co-organized a regular colloquium of criminal law scholars held at rotating locations in New York City every month or two. I say co-organized in quotes because Dan did all the work. My role was mostly to give this New York City colloquium some actual formal connection to New York City, since I taught at Brooklyn and Dan was officially in Florida, though it came up for every gathering. The email notification list for the colloquium, which Dan curated, grew to include people from all over the world because Dan had so many connections and didn't want to leave anyone out of the opportunity of being involved. And indeed, we attracted speakers from all over the country, as well as Canada, Israel, and elsewhere. I just returned to New York City after 3 years elsewhere, and I'm currently working with others to retrieve what will now be called the Markeliquium. As it happens, we just scheduled our first pair of speakers this week. In what proved to be the last years of his life, in addition to work-related interactions, Dan and I saw each other regularly for coffee or drinks, sometimes with others, sometimes just us. He also spoke often by phone. Dan's back bothered him and he would go for long walks and call me. and I'm certain many other friends, to pass the time. He was funny, he was generous, he cared about what was happening in my life. He shared what was happening in his. He was, in short, all you would want in a friend. But unusually, in my experience at least, for a well-known peer, he was also a sort of role model. I viewed him not only with affection, but with admiration. He was a devoted and dedicated professor, and when he became a father, he was even more devoted and dedicated to his children, yet somehow without slowing down professionally. Most of all, I admire that even in the most difficult times, he was filled with joy and gratitude for his life and its blessings. In 2011, Dan was chosen by a brand new criminal law journey at the University of Virginia to be the centerpiece of its inaugural volume. An event was organized for him to give a lecture and several others. I was one to offer commentary, all of which would then be published as the debut issue of the journal. The journal's selection of a scholar so relatively young and junior as the very first person to honor in this way left me amazed, and I must say jealous, but not surprised. This is what I said about Dan at the event before addressing the substance of his remarks. If you look at Dan's resume, you will see that he is one of the most prolific young scholars out there, not only about punishment theory, but about a number of other things as well. What you won't see is that Dan is also one of the most voracious, generous, and diligent readers of other people's work, and someone who offers such thorough and useful and helpful comments and suggestions to other people, that not only through his own work, which is more than enough for him to hang his hat on, but also through the way he has crafted and improved other people's work. It is clear that Dan is one of the most significant and influential criminal theorists of his and my generation. One of the small comforts I've taken in the wake of Dan's death is my gratitude for having the opportunity to offer that praise to and about him in his presence while he was alive. But that comfort is utterly dwarfed by my remorse in knowing what I and an entire intellectual community have lost. And that loss endures. It is ongoing. In July, my law school hosted the annual two-day CrimFest conference, which brought together more than 100 scholars from around the country. The conference Dan started and for a time presided over as both sage and animating spirit. Each year, I think, Dan should still be here. However long I'm given for my own professional life, I will never stop thinking that. Dan Markel was brilliant and beloved. He was in every way full of life, but he was denied his full of life. He had much more to give over many years to his friends, his colleagues, his community, and his family. That has all been taken away. Very truly yours, Michael Cahill.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so that's the conference that Dan was supposed to go to when he was killed that weekend.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right.
So
Horrible.
that's why it was kind of like a crazy suggestion when Wendy claimed that maybe the killers knew his schedule from his blog because
Right.
he was posting on his blog or Facebook or something about where he might be going. But I'm like, yeah, right. Like as if Sigfredo and Tato were reading Ralph's blog.
oh, I know.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Well, it these just do remind us that it's not just a community, but I find myself kind of ruminating over this lately because that I don't know, a few years ago there was a someone who drove his car, I think it was the 4th of July in Wisconsin, and he hit a bunch of people and children and killed a bunch of people and injured.
Yeah.
And he represented himself.
Yeah.
Oh,
Daryl Brooks.
Daryl Brooks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Brooks, yeah.
watched some of that. He
And
was
he kept,
insane.
yeah.
It was
And he
Christmas
kept
time.
talking, he kept arguing with the judge about how is it the state that can convict or can be trying me? How is that? And it
How is
really
it?
does show you that it is the state. You're not just hurting the person that you're injuring or murdering
Yeah.
and their family, but a larger community and the
Yeah.
entire community, statewide,
Yeah.
nation, whatever, however you want to look at it. But that's why it's called the state versus whomever.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you ready, Dawn?
I am ready. This is from Martha Minot, also from Harvard, I believe a professor. And this was May 21st, 2019. So this was the state of Florida versus Sigfredo and Catherine Magbanois. Dear Judge Hankinson, when we lost Dan Markel, his students lost an inspiring and rigorous teacher. His colleagues lost a supportive and engaged interlocutor. And the nation lost one of the most brilliant young scholars of criminal law. He was my student. Then, as he took up law teaching, he became my colleague and at times my teacher. His work built bridges across law, philosophy, politics, and concerns of ordinary people. He took on profound issues. Why do we punish when there is mercy warranted? He also tackled practical problems in the operation of sentencing and altering people's behaviors. I never had a conversation with him without sharpening my thinking. I miss his contributions to debate about scholarship and policy involving our own work or the nation's laws. He contributed to professional journals and to public debate in newspapers, magazines, and blogs, reaching way beyond lawyers and academics. More energetically and effectively than any other law professor I know, Dan was a mentor of young scholars. As a co-founder of a blog for law professors, Prof's blog, he read voraciously and recruited emerging scholars to participate. So many law teachers have told me his engagement made the difference in launching their careers. Dan passionately cared about people, but no one mattered more to him than his family. He modeled for other lawyers and academics how to be a great father, brother, and son. There are so few who are both brilliant and kind, sharply analytic, and humanely caring. And now this treasure of a person is gone and will never be replaced. Sincerely, Martha Minnone.
Okay, the next one is to Judge Everett. I don't know who it's from. I'll get there when I'm done. Okay. Dear Judge Everett, thank you for considering this victim impact statement as you determine the sentence to impose on Dan Markel's murderer. I urge you to impose the maximum sentence available under law. I first met Dan in 1997 on a bus in Jerusalem. Over the years that followed, we became very close friends, so much so that he served as a groomsman at my wedding, and I served as best man at his. That evening, as I waited under the wedding canopy for Dan to walk down the aisle, I never could have imagined that his marriage would end with an act of such horrific depravity. The three things most important to Dan above all else were family, family, and family. Yet because of his murder, his two children, whom Dan loved above all else, have been cut off not only from their father, but also from his and their family. I cannot know the grief, confusion, anger, and terror that they must feel from losing their father in this way. I'm unsure whether they will be given an opportunity to submit their own victim impact statements. So I would like to spend a moment telling the court about Dan's relationship with them. Nothing was more important to Dan than his children. As a professor, he enjoyed the benefits of a flexible workday, and he used that flexibility to ensure that he was an integral part of their daily lives. Taking them to daycare and school, picking them up, making them dinner, reading to them, and tucking them in at night. He was so proud of them, and he wanted most of all for them to grow up with a strong sense of the values most important to him, being committed to family, having a moral compass, and living a life of decency and kindness, having a strong Jewish identity and appreciation for Jewish tradition, and having the work ethic and perseverance to achieve their full potential. His murder has destroyed their family, taught his children at a tender age that wickedness can destroy a life of decency and hard work in the instant it takes for a bullet to travel the length of a gun, and has taken away their role model for Jewish manhood. There were many things I admired greatly about Dan, but perhaps his most extraordinarily quality was his ability to connect with and grow close to so many people. Woody Allen once said that 90% of life is showing up. Dan took that seriously. He made it a priority to be present for friends at times of joy and times of grief, at weddings, baby namings, and funerals. And through that commitment, he forged deep bonds with friends. He was always the first person to call on a birthday or anniversary before my own parents, and during difficult times, called frequently to show support. For me personally, Dan shared the moments of greatest joy as well as those of greatest sorrow. One of the images of Dan that will stay with me forever is the exuberance and sheer joy he shared while dancing the traditional ora?
Aura.
Oh, thank you. Ora dance at my own wedding. And he was a pillar of support when my wife and I were grieving the loss of my brother-in-law. More than any other friend, he called on a regular basis to check in, just to listen, or to offer words of love and support. One of the particular tragedies of Dan's murder is that Dan is not here to comfort us. Dan was also a connector. He loved to help other people find a mentor, or a job, or a spouse by introducing them to other members of his large circle of friends. He deserves credit for several marriages. Dan was also generous with his time. We were in graduate school at the same time, and he spent countless hours helping me work through my thoughts for my dissertation. In fact, he may be the only person who ever read and commented on multiple drafts of the tome, and he did so at his insistence. He understood that others did not have the same unusual capabilities in this realm and did not expect reciprocity. Reciprocity. Above all, Dan was an example for all who knew him of the power of giving. He gave his love and his friendship, and through doing so, built relationships and communities that now are torn at their center. The court should impose the maximum sentence on the intellectual author of his murder. Respectfully submitted, Matthew Price.
Wow, that's great to hear from this person because in Ruth Markel's book, she wrote about how Matthew Price's wife's brother was killed because he was getting divorced and his crazy wife was having an affair. So the crazy wife wanted all his money. So she concocted some fake scheme with her boyfriend to make it look as if he were the victim of a mugging or something. And he was stabbed to death in the street after having dinner with his soon-to-be ex-wife. So I was like, wow, what are the chances that this could happen? This poor guy. Yeah, to have two murders happen to people he loved.
20. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so that case, I can't remember the name of the victim or the wife, but the wife actually ran off to Europe. I think she went off to Italy or Spain or something and was living under an assumed name. But eventually she was caught and brought to justice.
Wow.
So anyway, a whole nother crazy true crime case there. Yeah.
Involving a divorce or a
yeah, it
soon
was
to
a
be divorced
divorce
or
case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but okay, so this is a pretty heavy topic. So
It's hard. It is.
Yeah.
But
you know.
I often thought, like from Ruth's book, I don't remember that in Ruth's book, but I have no memory, so it doesn't mean anything. But I always often thought about the way Ruth and Phil described Dan and others. I don't know if you guys have felt this way, but it's like, I would really like to have met him. You know, he seems like such a person that you could just strike a conversation with, and it would be interesting, and just the kind of person you like to have in your life, you know. You just
Yeah, he's a
Definitely.
people person. Yeah,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
it's pretty cool
Yeah.
to think that okay, we would like to strive to be like him, you know,
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
just lighten up the room and draw connections and
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
have real relationships with people and
Definitely.
have a nice supportive circle of friends. So yeah,
Yeah. I
okay.
found it interesting. It said they met on a bus in Jerusalem. I've been to
Yeah.
Israel numerous times. It's not an uncommon thing in that country, in that culture, people just to randomly
Really.
start talking to each other.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
and make lifelong friends, not just meeting people on the street. It's very
Oh,
touching.
That's pretty
Yeah.
wonderful.
it's nice.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And it is good to remember the good things about someone after they're gone, regardless of how the reason they're gone, right? And so I was thinking about what we were doing tonight, and I was thinking about how that's what I wanted to focus on, because surely all of these letters really bring out these fine qualities of
Yeah.
Dan. And I'm sure those who miss him terribly do take some comfort in knowing all these great things about him, and he probably brings smiles to people's face all the time in their memory of him, I
Mhm.
hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess it's Ben's turn.
Is it Ben?
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
okay, so who is this one from?
Norma
His cousin.
Butterfield.
His cousin.
Okay.
Yeah.
To the Honorable James Hankinson. Dan Markel was my cousin. His father, Phil, my first cousin. I knew Dan as a child, my little cousin, and became reacquainted with him when his sister Shelley got married in Toronto of August 1996. My husband and I went to the wedding and enjoyed a coffee with Dan in a small cafe in Toronto the day before the wedding. Dan was so warm and welcoming and wondered aloud why it took so long for us to reconnect and get to know each other as adults. We instantly warmed to one another and saw each other as often as we could, given that we lived miles apart across the continent and in different countries. My husband and I were intrigued by Dan's loving and positive nature and enjoyed being with him. Dan clerked for a judge of the United States Court of the Ninth Circuit in Phoenix. After his time there, he would return for yearly reunions with the judge and former clerks. We had a winter home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and spent as much time as we could with Dan whenever we were both in town. Dan introduced us to the judge on a couple of occasions and to other attorneys he worked with. We went to movies, dinners, and he occasionally stayed with us as well. We loved spending time together. Dan kept in touch and visited us in her home in Victoria, BC, with Wendy shortly after they got married. Whenever we spoke by phone, he would constantly talk about his cherished boys. It was clear that they were the light of his life. When he and Wendy separated, Dan was distraught about his children and the entire situation. Losing Dan was a huge and painful shock for me. I cannot imagine the grief and suffering Dan's parents, Ruth and Phil, his sister, and other family members have been going through since his untimely and shocking death. They continue to suffer while this tragedy continues and always will. Dan's two boys will never know and experience the depth of the love their father had for them and will not receive his loving encouragement and guidance as they grow older. Best, Norma Butterfield.
Whew. Okay, I have the next one. This comes from my area of the world. This comes from Orly Lobel, I believe is how it's pronounced, and she's a professor of law also, and she's the founding director of the Center for Employment and Labor Policy here at the University of San Diego. This is also to Judge Hankinson. I want to tell you about our friend Dan Markel, who I miss every day. Dan was a close friend and colleague. We met at Harvard Law School as students and became closer as we both started our teaching careers in 2005, Dan in Florida and me in California. Since his death, there have been many memorials for Dan, and my words here are partly adapted from words spoke at one of those memorials, which was held at Harvard University in 2014. Dan was beloved by all of his colleagues around the country and the world. He radiated energy and warmth and was known for his ability to build friendships, spread love, creativity, and joy. Early on in our teaching, Dan brought me on as the first woman's permanent blogger of the popular blog Prof's Blog he founded. Dan was our peer, but he was wiser, and he realized early on what is important. He taught us to speak our minds and to embrace broader audiences, to theorize, but to connect with practice. He helped us move beyond conventional anxieties of tenure and hierarchy and instead care about the ideas and research and teaching for their own sake. To care about building our institutions, contributing to our community, energizing our students in the class and beyond, enriching our minds through engagement and conversation. Dan was brilliant, a brilliant scholar, a gifted writer, a fearless thinker. He knew how to capture the essence of a difficult topic, to understand the underlying logic of current debates, and he pushed us all to fine-tune our thinking. He knew, however, that more important than any one piece of scholarship, however groundbreaking and well-received, are the exchanges and friendships among colleagues. He also understood that intellectual engagement cannot be done right without heart, without knowing the people and lives behind the theory and concepts. And so the Markel network grew. We absorbed and internalized his sense of community, and with Dan as our leader, our glue, we connected. Dan's generosity with his time, with his thoughts, his wisdom, with his friendships from the many paths he took all around the world was infectious. His warmth and openness were irresistible. Dan knew everybody, and he wanted everyone he loved to know each other. I know that many of us here today would not know each, surely not be as close as we are, if Dan had not introduced us. A month before his death, I received a card that a contribution by Dan was made in my name to Maison, a nonprofit organization working to end hunger among people of all faiths in the United States and Israel. Every end of the semester, Dan invited his students to eat at his house. He cooked and invited people to meals, making sure no one is left without a home in the holidays.
Oh,
These little acts of kindness and bonding were typical and widespread. In all of these interactions, Dan taught us that we can, indeed should have fun in our serious endeavors, and magically, he turned professional ventures into team adventures. He expanded for us conferences from the lecture room to hallways to restaurants to the Sabbath dinner to his famous happy hour, now called the Markel Fest, which continues on in his memory. Maybe we should have one of those. Sounds great.
the same thing.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
Oh, that's so great. The Markel Fest. Dan lived life to the fullest. He loved learning. He loved trying out new things, traveling, meeting new people. He enjoyed practicing his Hebrew with me, and he was a little shy when it came to speaking, but his Hebrew was much better than he would admit. And I remember him coming to professional talks in Israel that were completely in Hebrew and challenging himself to participate in the discussion. He even let me drag him to yoga classes, and he got into those twisty poses, though it wasn't exactly his thing. The last time I saw Dan was in Tel Aviv the winter before he died. The same evening he landed, after a very long flight, he came to my birthday party and danced through the night wearing his Batman t-shirt. A few days later, he came to my parents' house for the memorial of my brother Danny, who died at the age of 18 while serving in the Israel army.
Ooh.
In happy moments and in sad moments, Dan was there for you, and he moved gracefully and naturally between the professional and the personal, the serious and the funny, the heartbreaks and the joys of life. Most of all, Dan loved his boys, Ben and Link. Dan talked about you constantly. He loved taking you to Canada to visit your grandparents and your aunt. He was proud of you and protective. He fought to spend as much time with you as possible. On days he didn't take you to daycare, he made sure to come to daycare and have breakfast with you. When you weren't together, he missed you terribly, and he made sure to Skype with you and always wished you good night. He had so many plans for you. I think something's skipped.
Yes, something's
I
missing.
think that's a duplicate. Yeah.
Okay, the last time we talked, Dan was full of excitement. We were on different continents, but he video Skyped to show me the beautiful beach house he and Amy were staying in New York. He was, as usual, bragging about the boys and talking about all the fun things he was planning for the summer. He was in love and he was happy. The terrible news arrived a week later when I was conferencing in London. The tragic events were quickly spread among Dan's many friends around the world. It was devastating. Dan left behind hundreds, probably thousands of people he touched: students, friends, colleagues, neighbors, extended family, his parents, sister, and his sons. None of us were ever the same after his horrifying death. He is missed every single day. Orly Lobel.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, she also posted something, which I'm pretty sure was on Prof's blog. So
I remembered the
that's
name.
still up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Okay.
Okay, should we go to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, this
thank
is
you.
to the Honorable James C. Hankinson. On Friday evening, July 18th, 2014, the senseless shooting and killing of Dan Markel closed a dearly held chapter of my life and that of my family. When I received the agonizing call from Ruth Markel, Danny's mother, that he was shot in his home that very day and was not expected to live, I could not comprehend that anyone would want to take the life of this outgoing, bright, fun, loving young family man who was held in such high esteem. His network of colleagues and friends was wide and diverse, and I immediately knew that they too would be as devastated as I. I recall Danny as a very young boy when he moved to Toronto as our neighbor. He had a bright, inviting smile and demeanor. He had what we called a photographic memory. Once he read or understood something, it became part of his mindset. My girls, who spent a lot of time with Danny, recognized that playing any game that required recall was a game that they should avoid. He was extremely curious. He read voraciously, questioned friends and teachers about every facet of life. Danny was well-rounded as well. He loved the out of doors and had a number of athletic interests. At our summer home, he was ready to take on the community at tennis. Mostly Dan was a social individual. He drew people to him and always had time for each of them. He treated everyone as a close friend, and each in return felt he was that person's closest friend. Danny spent his summers at camp, and as time went on, he enrolled in a variety of courses at schools across the U.S., Israel, and England. Dan was like a brother to my girls. He was their role model. He took time to give them good counsel. However, he knew it was important to challenge them about the choices in life that they were making. They marveled in all of Danny's successes, even though he left them many years ago to pursue his own education. In recent years, we only saw Danny and his two boys intermittently when he returned home or when we visited him in Florida or at special occasions such as his engagement and marriage. We did communicate through his parents and via email to make certain he continued to be that important person in my life. We did get time to see Danny become the consummate parent to his two boys. When he was with them, they commanded his total attention. They were everything to him. He made every effort to shape their development and to inure, is that a word? Inure in them a respect and understanding for the religion Danny loved. It is so heartbreaking to know that his boys will grow up without the love and guidance of their giving father. The passing of Danny in this senseless manner was, as I mentioned, a shock to me and our family. I dearly miss the times we were together. I miss his beautiful, bright smile, his sparkling blue eyes, his infectious laugh, his love of life and affection for everyone in it. I miss his straightforward and sometimes blunt approach to life. It has been difficult to realize that we will no longer enjoy and benefit from Danny's relationship with my family and myself. We are constantly reminded of that loss and console ourselves with all of the qualities and enjoyment Danny brought to us. I always appreciated how Danny was willing to encourage his colleagues to constantly improve themselves. My husband and I followed his career and read about every event on Facebook. Reading his blogs, which offered a challenge to all and helped everyone to develop their own ethical approach to the law and life, displayed his love for law and the willingness he had to share himself unselfishly with others. He gave countless hours to everyone who was willing to debate with him. The loss of Danny was and is devastating to me. I can only imagine how it has affected his colleagues in the field of law itself. As important, being close friends and neighbors of the Markel family, I can see and feel how Danny's death has impacted them. Their inability over the last few years to see their grandchildren to share their love and knowledge of him and his family's values with them is a loss to the Markels and to Danny's boys. They are missing the kind of love and understanding that is important in their development. It is my hope that justice, which has moved at such a slow pace, will be served for all those involved in his death. Sincerely, Pearl Bell.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, this reminds us that during this time, that was when Wendy wouldn't let Dan's parents and sisters see the kids. It was a total of 6 years that they couldn't see the grandchildren until, I think, this is what I suspect, that Wendy wanted to look good when she testified at Katie's second trial. So sometime in 2022, she allowed a tiny bit of communication. Yeah, like a controlled visit to have ice cream or something.
Yeah.
How big of her?
Yeah, exactly. And
gal.
there was
Yeah.
supervision. There had to be a third party hanging around, I think.
Yeah.
More than one. I think she had her parents come too.
To the ice cream one, I thought it was
Oh,
like a
no, I'm
family
thinking of
friend.
I'm thinking of the butterfly one, I think.
Yeah, the butterfly
Yeah.
one where Donna said, "Who would do this in broad daylight?"
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
As if she like
The
had
irony.
nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oy.
Okay. So who's next? Let's see. Ben?
Ben's next, I think.
Oh,
Okay.
losing track.
Are you okay? Can you keep reading? You feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Getting lost thinking about this.
It's very, it's
I
very
know.
thought provoking and feeling provoking for sure. But I guess it should be, right? I mean,
Yeah. Dawn, you reminded me of something when you were talking about all the outpouring of support and being comfort to Dan's family. There's actually a saying just thinking about it because Dan was Jewish and he was very scholarly. There's a saying in the book of Ecclesiastes, which was written by King Solomon, that the bonds of love are stronger than those of death. And I think it's really coming through here, saying like they tried to extinguish him, and instead you're seeing this whole outpouring of memory and support keeping him alive, which is probably a real nuisance to the Adelsons. They tried to get rid of him.
and it's such a contrast to the way when you think about Donna's emails, and I don't really want to bring them up now or today, but it's just such a contrast. They they developed such coldness and hatred towards somebody who really had all these great qualities. Like, how does that happen? It does happen. It does happen, but it's kind of crazy that that can happen.
I kind of think about it. It seems as I'm reading this, it's that the Adelsons' desire to kill him, I think, was even more than just about the kids. It was they couldn't stand the contrast to themselves. That they had so much darkness and evil to them, and he had so much light and goodness, and it probably drove them mad.
Yeah. Made them feel small. Yeah.
I mean, this is such a huge contrast between Charlie versus Dan, but Wendy saw it fit for her kids to hang out with Charlie and called him the best uncle ever.
Right. I mean, the two friends that Charlie had abandoned him when they found out that, when he went to trial. I mean, he really didn't have a ton of friends. And
I've heard
it is quite a contrast.
Most of the Adelsons' friends I've heard have abandoned them. I mean, they still have those people that were on the stand, but I've heard that. Yeah.
I don't know, but I was glad to see that there were no signs of phone calls between Donna and those old friends anymore in her latest batch of jail calls or prison calls, because for a while there, she still had some phone calls with her old buddies up until her trial. Then I think they probably finally saw the light and were like, okay, we're out of here.
The scales fell from their eyes finally, maybe. Yeah.
So who's she calling now? Just Harvey?
Probably.
I think so.
Jackie Fulford sometimes.
It's so horrible for me to hear all these details of what these boys could have had in their life, and instead they were raised by the people who killed their dad. That is just a brutal irony that it just kills me.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ben, it's your turn.
All right. Okay. To the Honorable James C. Hankinson. We're all permanent contributors to Prof's blog, the law professor's blog that Dan founded in 2005. We write to describe Dan's creation of Prof's blog, because this blog reflects Dan's friendship, intellectual integrity, enthusiasm, and public spiritedness. Although we each had individual friendships with Dan, we write this letter collectively to describe how Dan's murder deprived us and the larger community of law professors of these virtues as they were reflected in Prof's blog. Dan's idea in creating Prof's blog was that legal scholars could transcend partisanship, professional jealousies, and ideological bitterness by discussing law in the academic profession in the spirit of friendship. Dan himself was tenacious about both his convictions and his friendships, and he was ingeniously optimistic that his stubborn passions, impressing the former, would never endanger the latter. His blog was an effort to generalize his optimism to the public at large. He posted and encouraged us to post on every topic, regardless of how controversial it was, relating to the legal profession, academia, and scholarship. He invited us to post regardless of our political or ideological values. Several of us, indeed, disagree with Dan about many of his strongly held convictions, sometimes in print. Yet Dan trusted that so long as people posted in the spirit of friendship, the exchange would always be worthwhile. Given the savage invective to which anonymous online commenters are prone, it is an unsurprising understatement to say that Dan's trust was not always rewarded. Dan never, however, wavered in his good-natured response. He seemed genuinely perplexed by the viciousness that inevitably surfaced on the internet and would occasionally delete anonymous comments that descended into personal insults to prevent them from intimidating others, but he himself never responded with sarcasm or anger. Instead, he modeled good nature, modesty, and kindness in his own posts, which ranged from erudite doctrinal or philosophical discussions on criminal law, civic posts announcing academic events and job opportunities, promotion of other, especially younger scholars' work, and pure whimsy on a miscellany of topics, fiction, hockey, snacks during class. Prof's blog was, under Dan's leadership, a source of community for legal professors at every stage of their career. 150 professors, roughly estimated, guest blogged at Prof's blog, and many thousands visited its pages during its almost a decade and a half of existence. It was a place where law school deans could explore how to integrate practical skills into legal academia. Entry-level professors could vent their angst about their job prospects, and everyone could test drive their ideas. At its best, Prof's blog radiated Dan's own incessantly friendly yet stubbornly argumentative personality. We are carrying on Prof's blog in Dan's memory. We hope that a shadow of Dan's spirit still shows. Dan's loss, however, dealt a grievous blow to the enterprise. That blow is itself a small part of the loss of fellowship and scholarly community that Dan's murder inflicted on scholars everywhere, whom Dan did so much to bring together through friendship and argument. Sincerely, Rich Garnett, Paul J. Shearl, Fort Howard Corporation Professor of Law, Notre Dame Law School, Roderick H. Mills Jr., William T. Comfort III, Professor of Law, NYU Law School, Sarah Lawsky, Professor of Law, Northwestern Law School of Law, Ethan Lieb, John Calmary, Distinguished Professor of Law, Fordham Law School, Orly Lobel, Warren Distinguished Professor of Law, University of San Diego, Daniel Rodriguez, Howard Washington Professor of Law, Northwestern Pritzker Law School, Howard Wasserman Professor of Law, Florida International University School of Law, and Paul Horowitz, Gordon Rosen Professor, University of Alabama School of Law.
Wow.
I bet they're all remembering him today.
Yeah.
You know, or they have their days where they remember him during the year,
Yeah.
certain dates.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, especially if they're still doing that Crimfest conference every July. They're probably
Right.
honoring him. Yeah.
Right.
So I have an old friend from my college and law school days who is also a law professor who was friends with Dan. And she told me that the law professors had kind of agreed amongst themselves not to speak to the media because they didn't want the whole case to become like true crime sensationalized, which of course it already has with all these TV specials and different YouTube channels and
Right.
documentaries are being made and stuff. So
Mhm.
I think that's why you don't hear a lot of Dan's friends speaking out.
Sure.
It's been hard to get people who are willing to talk who knew him. Yeah,
Mhm.
but his mom has been such a great advocate though.
Yeah.
She has.
Yeah.
She really has.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of criticism that can come your way if you put
Mhm.
yourself out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might not, I don't know how much she gets into reading comments. Maybe she's smart enough not to do that, but I think I haven't seen anything negative, but you just never know what somebody might come up with. So,
Yeah. Well, I think it's okay to mention, but I've reached out to Jared Ross, who is a friend of Dan's,
oh, right.
and couple of years ago, he was willing to be on different YouTube channels to
Right. I
talk
remember
about
that.
Dan and everything, but he said he kind of got taken aback by how vicious and mean people were
Can be.
towards him. So he's
Aw.
just gonna be quiet and do stuff in the background without being a public face for now. So
Wow.
yeah, because
That's
you know,
sad.
people are mean, like they're
Yeah.
Yeah, people can be
claiming
really
that,
mean.
oh, he doesn't know what he's talking
Oh,
about because he's not a real lawyer, he's a
Oh.
lobbyist or
That's
you know,
ridiculous.
he
He's a
he
nice
can't
guy.
speak.
I can't
Yeah.
believe that.
ugh.
Yeah, people are
Ridiculous.
just very entitled. It's like, look, these people are willing to share information and
Yeah,
their
and their experience. Yeah.
experiences. Yeah.
There's all
So,
sorts of keyboard warriors out there. They're
Yeah.
all
Right.
vicious behind their keyboards.
Oh, that's right. They're courageous when they're anonymous. Yeah.
Right. Make themselves feel good about themselves, I guess, by putting
Yeah.
someone else down. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a shame. I mean, he
Yeah.
was a trained lawyer. He's a lobbyist as well. So he's not a practicing, I mean, he's still
Yeah.
practicing
So,
law. It's
and
just a different
he
type of,
he can give insight if he wants to, and he
sure.
actually knew
Right.
Dan and
Right.
Wendy
And Wendy. Right.
and Charlie too. He knew Charlie from high school. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. He had personal
That's
experience.
crazy.
because
And
we
I'm
do
not a
want to
lawyer
hear.
at all, and I have every right to give my
Yeah,
insight.
you
That's
give
right.
your
Yeah,
opinion.
And no,
exactly.
and no offense to you, Ben and Judy, but you don't have to have JD or whatever behind your name to have an intelligent brain that can
Exactly.
decipher the information and come up with a point of view that's intelligent.
That's right.
Mhm.
And you can do that.
And
for
Patty,
sure.
a lot of lawyers are not intelligent.
It's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they like to talk. Yeah.
There's some, yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
They're not all Dan Markel, are they?
You know,
Yeah. Okay. Well, Patty, are you
I,
ready?
is it Patty or
Is it
But I
mine?
think
Patty's turn?
I think it's Dawn's turn.
Oh,
I
it's
think it's
Dawn's
mine.
turn. It's like
It
we
might
shuffled
be,
people around on the squares.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay,
This
go
is,
ahead.
yeah, this is a short one, and this is also to Judge Hankinson, same trial, Sigfredo and Catherine. They were both found guilty eventually. And this is from Rabbi Schnur and Shani Orickman. And this is from the Shabbat of Tallahassee. And I believe Rabbi Shur went to the hospital when Dan was brought to the hospital, if I'm not mistaken.
oh,
His name came up during
Yeah.
the police
yeah.
interview with Wendy.
Yeah, and
So,
Wendy was like laughing about his name too
yeah,
when she was in the
yeah.
police interview, which was weird,
A lot of things
inappropriate.
she did was
Yeah.
very weird. Okay, so dear Judge Hankinson, we had the merit and pleasure to know Danny and see him at our shul often. When he just moved to town and later with his kids, he would come with them and set an example of a loving and dedicated father. He was also so friendly and had a great influence on the community. He was our Kohen priest who would do priestly blessings for us.
wow.
His passing was a great loss for us as personal friends and for the community as a friend and a role model for a guy who was so dedicated to Judaism and to his children while at the same time a hardworking man. We miss him very dearly and he will be forever remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, do you guys remember when True Lifestyles got some jail records, and she told us that the rabbi's wife here actually
yes.
went to visit Donna
I remember
when
that.
she first
remember.
showed
Yeah,
up
you have
in
such a
jail.
great memory. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
And-
but people were saying, well, that's her job as someone who works for the Chabad, I guess, that she's
Well,
supposed
I'll just say that the Chabad, they're a Hasidic organization all like globally, and that's what they do is they do outreach to people all over the world, and they're very non-judgmental people. So they'll go to people from college campuses to prisons to all sorts of remote locations. It's it's not them sympathizing with Donna. It's just
Right.
they're very try to be non-judgmental people and try to do outreach, and they try to find sparks of humanity even in the worst people.
That's
Exactly.
nice. Yeah.
And maybe even, I mean, who knows who's visited Luis Rivera, but
Yeah.
he's come around, he's apologized. I think he
Yeah.
always had a lot of regret. He expressed that early on. But you never know what a visit like that could do with somebody
Yeah.
who's
Right.
either in prison or in jail facing a trial. I'm sure her lawyers would have not advised her to say anything to them, but you would have been protected. I think any comments that she had with somebody like that wouldn't be allowed as evidence.
Well, she always claimed she was innocent anyway, so I'm
That's true,
sure
right? She
wasn't
never
gonna
came
do
around,
that.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So
It would-
Julia has a question. I don't think this was the same rabbi because in my memory it was someone from out of state,
Oh,
Oh, right.
out of
Right.
the country even. Like maybe it could have been someone from England. I'm not
Mm.
sure, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't this person. Yeah, at Dan's wedding, because he probably didn't even know this person back then.
At that time, I was wondering
Yeah.
when he
Oh, right.
Yeah.
when he got established with the Shabbat. Am I pronouncing this incorrectly, Ben? Shabbat.
Chabad.
Yeah, it's not the CH. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
he
It's okay.
probably was more involved with them locally in Tallahassee after they
Yeah.
had children or were
Probably,
pregnant.
yeah.
Yeah. hmm
Uh,
That was
Yeah,
my impression.
because they
Yeah.
didn't move to Tallahassee until after the marriage. So, well,
Right.
Oh, right.
No,
wait a
weren't
minute.
they?
Yeah, no, I think
Well,
he started at FSU and
oh,
then he met
Yeah.
maybe.
I'm curious. Let's
Yeah,
Google
they
it.
moved. Yeah, they moved
And they
before they
got
got married. They were living there before they got married.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows? But somewhere in my head, I think it was a different rabbi who
Yeah,
was
and they might have
upset.
both been there. Yeah.
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 hmm
hmm Okay. So whose turn is it now?
I think it's
Patty?
me.
Okay.
First, I want to say I'm sorry about my dogs. I usually don't
Oh.
let them be in here when I'm on Judy's show because I really try to be more professional for her show. But
Thank you.
my neighbor was lighting off fireworks tonight,
Oh.
and my little dog was scared to death and following like my glued on shadow. So I thought I just didn't have the heart. So I thought hopefully they'll be good, and he was. But my little dog Addie started yapping. So anyway,
Aw,
sorry about
Okay.
that. But
No
okay,
problem.
read Aria.
it's okay.
Let's see. This letter's written 2019. To whom it may concern, I have been called with great heartache to write this letter regarding the tragic loss of Dan Markel. I had the pleasure of meeting Dan at a number of his family celebrations that I had officiated as rabbi to his sister's family. Dan at those times stood at to me for his smile, engaging energy and passion for his family. My efforts in this letter is to express the loss from what I have seen in his family. Since Dan's murder, the scope of this loss is incalculable and inconsolable. For Ruth and Phil, there is not an expectation that life gets back to normal because there is nothing normal after the loss of a child. At best, one may find a new normal. There is also the loss of contact with Dan's children, their grandchildren, which denies them the comfort of seeing Dan's living legacy grow and flourish in the world. For his sister Shelley, her husband Ian, and their children, Michael, Ari, and Roni, the loss of family is measured in relation to the kind of connection they had before the murder. To this I can attest the familial bonds were deep and loving. There could never be a full or real family celebration without Dan being present, and his absence colors and darkens every moment they have enjoyed and will enjoy in the future. It is the loss of a brother, an uncle, and the loss of nephews and cousins, which is to say there are losses in life that seldom exist without an echo. And Dan's murder is no exception to this. That's profound.
Yeah.
It leaves a devastating gap in their lives, and none of this, of course, accounts for the what if. What of the people he would have met? The love he would have shared, the joyous moments he would have celebrated, the comfort he would have provided in challenging times, the academic work that would have influenced the world we live in. Therein lies the insight to your request for a victim impact statement. The true impact is the denial of all things that might have been, but now will never be. Sincerely, Rabbi Aaron Flansreich. Is that how I say that, Ben? Flansreich?
Maybe Flansreich. Probably Flansreich or Reich. Something.
Flansreich.
Probably close enough. I'm sure.
That was a very profound.
Yeah.
And beautiful letter.
It was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one thing about loss that I have a issue with survivor guilt because of what happened when I was a kid. But it's when you lose somebody close to you, and it's like that first year or so, and at least with me, I would find myself maybe laughing about something and feeling like, oh, or oh, what would it be like if this person were here? And it's just it's so the presence is so heavy for the first year or so, and it never will ever go away when you lose a
Yeah.
child like Markel's have, or somebody who's super close to you. It never goes away
Yeah.
completely. And
Mhm.
he really captured that in that letter,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
Mm-mm-mm.
overwhelming how many people wrote all these heartfelt letters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Judy, for putting all of these together too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Sure.
Judy,
I mean,
you're the best.
it's in the court file, so
right,
you just click on it and get this
yeah,
huge PDF.
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah. So, whose turn is it now?
Ben, I think
Ben.
it's
That's
Ben.
why.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Dear Judge Hankinson, thank you in advance for your willingness to consider all the victim impact statements submitted to the court in connection with this case. Dan Markel was one of my dearest friends. At the time of his death, I talked to Danny at least once a week. In this letter, I will focus on our professional connection and the impact of his death on my career experience. Inspired by Danny's optimism about the capacity of the legal academy to promote and improve access to justice, I made a career change and decided to pursue work as an entry-level law professor. Danny encouraged me at every step of the way, and my view of the legal academic community as generally positive, welcoming, and supportive was influenced tremendously by Danny's outlook. The notion of being part of that community without Danny's presence in it never crossed my mind. Yet just over 2 weeks after I officially joined the community in my new position as an assistant professor, he was brutally murdered. My connection with Danny began in 2004 when I met him through a small alumni network we cherished, the Dorot Fellowship in Israel. We connected in 2011, not long after I moved with my husband and small daughter to Danny's hometown of Toronto, Ontario. A relocation provided a welcome opportunity for our families to see each other when Danny and Wendy were in town. In addition to many other things in our common, we each had infant sons and a toddler preschooler, and all of us got along wonderfully. At the next time, I was pursuing graduate studies in contemplation of entering legal academia. Over the next 3 years, Danny became a close friend. Particularly after he and Wendy separated, my husband and I always made plans to see him and his boys when they were in Toronto, and we kept them close during other times. I'll read this footnote. The last time I heard Danny's voice was on a voicemail he left me the night of my birthday. Tragically, I didn't hear my phone while attending a surprise celebration that my husband organized for me. And the following day, July 18th, 2014, it was too late.
Oh, that's sad.
Professionally, yeah, I can't even imagine.
Mm-mm.
Professionally, Danny was integral to my decision to pursue a law professor career. His generosity in reviewing drafts of my papers, commenting on version after version of my job market materials, providing feedback on my ideas, and giving lots of good advice was second to none. He went out of his way to introduce me to an extraordinary set of scholars in my area, all of whom became important role models and allies, whether they knew it or not, in the struggle to move forward after Danny was murdered. Consistent with so many others' description of his loyal support during the early stages of their career, Danny's enthusiasm about my work and his optimism about the academic enterprise were infectious. He was not naive about the competitive nature or the political divisions within legal academia. But one thing Danny said to me in the midst of a busy conference is a perfect reflection of his ability to relate genuinely to others and bring people with different viewpoints together. I win my readers over one conversation at a time. For him, connecting with each person and taking their perspective seriously was central to his job as a scholar. The humility embedded in Danny's gregariousness was a life lesson for me and so many around him. It is impossible to express the extent to which Danny's murder has affected me. Like an emotional earthquake, the loss has changed my internal landscape, stripping much of the sense of abundance and possibility that I possessed and relied on in pursuing my new career. I've sought counseling and medical treatment for depression. I'm haunted by thoughts of the suffering in order of appearance in Danny's life. His parents, Ruth and Phil, his sister Shelley and her family, his children Lincoln and Benjamin, and his soulmate Amy. My loss is trivial in comparison to theirs. It is hard to imagine beginning the healing process. Thank you for your consideration of this letter and all the other victim impact statements submitted to the court. Sincerely yours, Emily Satterthwaite, Toronto.
Another great letter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm glad
It's
some of the
heartbreaking.
letters mention Amy too, because
Me
I think about
too.
her a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen much about her. She's
She hasn't been shown much attention, and yet she had to have been devastated
Oh,
along with
Mhm.
everyone. I mean, she loved him.
yeah.
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 Yeah. Because their relationship had just started.
Yeah.
So how horrible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the next one, and I was wondering about this, what I was going to ask, but this is from Shelley Markel, Dan's sister, his only sibling. Okay.
Yeah.
And this was in 2022.
Okay.
I am Shelley Markel. Danny Markel, the victim in this case, was my brother, my only sibling. I was Danny's older sister, and I played that role with pride. When we were young, I showed Danny how to tie his shoelaces. I taught him how to blow his nose, and I also gave him advice on how he, as a cute little 9-year-old, should manage his love life, which constituted trying to win the affection of our various teenage babysitters. So sweet. As we grew older and Danny became more accomplished, I rarely gave him advice about major professional decisions like which college he should choose, which law journal he should submit his article to, or which job would serve him best in his career. He had a wonderful community of mentors and advisors, as well as an enormous network of friends and colleagues from every corner of his life with whom he could share and test his ideas. Instead, with me, he spent hours on the phone focused on family and relationships. How could he express his love to a girlfriend? How could he manage an argument he was having with our parents? What techniques did I use when dealing with our kids' terrible twos? And how could he deal with the devastation resulting from his divorce? I listened patiently, I gave advice, we shared our experiences. And in every conversation, we strengthened our relationship. We had an everlasting bond, shared values, customs, and history that started in childhood and continued into our adult lives. These were the things that connected us as brother and sister. These are the things that I am left without. I no longer have Danny around to share with him the accomplishments of each of our children and the happiness and feelings of pride they bring, nor to give updates about our cousins living in distant parts of the world, nor to share the burden and responsibility of aging parents.
Yeah.
I bear that alone. I am sad. I am lonely. I am angry that Danny was taken from me. He will not be there when we have the next family celebration or joint family trip to Disney World, or when we gather around the table for a holiday meal with our parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles, as we do every year. He will not be there with me to decide on medical treatments or care for our parents, nor sit with me in grief one day. Instead, the order of our world has been cruelly reversed, and me and my parents, our children, and our friends sit in grief over Danny's death. Danny and I also shared other basic elements, our genes. As we were growing up, people would look at us and ask who we looked like. I have brown hair and brown eyes like my father. Danny, on the other hand, when he was a child, he had this rich blonde hair and bright blue eyes, just like my mother. And yet, when my family, friends, and relatives would look at us, they would insist that we looked alike, easily recognizable as brother and sister. I think so too. I've noticed that. Perhaps it was the nose or the profile or the shape of forehead. I couldn't really specify, but the genes were there and the connection was unmistakable. Danny was stridently confident in his abilities and opinions, but he also had this little twinkle of mischief in those blue eyes, sometimes accompanied by this embarrassed little smile that acknowledged he was about to say something that might get him into some minor trouble. What is so crazy about this image is that it often appears in my everyday life. My son, now 18 years old, is dark in complexion with deep, dark brown eyes and no blonde or blue-eyed genes in sight, but he has that mischievous twinkle in his eye and that same little smile, and above all, his overriding confidence that is so strikingly similar to Danny. It is shocking. Sorry. My husband and I have recently been caught by surprise at that unexpected connection. When my son came home recently and said something like, "Don't worry, Mom. I know it looks like I haven't studied much, but I'm ready for that test. I'm good." And then he smiled that little smile, acknowledging that he would get a scolding. But the confidence was there, and I could swear that Danny was speaking to me in that moment.
Oh,
Mm. When I think of Danny's younger son, and the last time I saw him in person over 6 years ago, he was 5 years old, and he was the splitting image of Danny at that age. The physical likeness was uncanny, and the energy and the spirit were also so similar. It makes me wonder, how will Danny's two sons grow up? Will they have that same mischievousness and the overbrimming confidence as Danny and my son? Are those inherited traits? Are they going to show up in Danny's boys? Or are his sons going to have missed out because their father is not here to instill such characteristics in them? And if they do show up, who is going to tell those boys that it came from their father? They won't have known their dad and his confidence, his respect for intelligence and scholarship, his deep connection to friends, his love of family, his love of life. They will have missed out on having their father be an integral part of their lives, and they will never benefit from all the things he could have taught and shared with them. We are all going to miss out because this special person is no longer in our lives. This is July. It is the 8th anniversary of Dan's murder. 8 years that he has not been with us. In those 8 years, we continue to suffer. We continue to grieve. I think about Danny every single day. His murder has been horrible for me and my family. Shocking, surreal, hard to understand, and above all, it makes me so angry. I think I have to skip a page here. Okay. I wish I had only thought about his smile and grand hugs, but instead, I think about how he is not going to be here with us for the future. His future was cut short. He was only 41 years old. Imagine what was ahead of him, guiding his two sons as they grow up, teaching them as they cross into the threshold of adulthood and their bar mitzvahs, watching them graduate and go to their prom, helping them choose colleges, or the many family birthdays and celebrations he'll miss, like my mom's upcoming birthday and my dad's ski trip he still plans to take with the grandchildren. Or what about the career and scholarly achievements he had ahead of him? Maybe another book or another generation of keen law students to teach. A community leader in his home of Tallahassee? Maybe he could have become a dean at the SFU Law School, or perhaps a judge in a court like this one. But he's not going to have any of these opportunities. They were taken from him by those who planned and carried out his murder. A murder. It was not a disease or a freak accident that took Danny from us. It was murder. Justice means assuring that those responsible for the crime are convicted and receive the strongest possible sentence. Our system of justice, our values of right and wrong, and even Dan's own writing about restitution demand that the world be placed into proper order. And that, Judge Wheeler, is what I respectfully request in this case. Thank you, Shelley Markel.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. So let's see. We're getting closer to the end, especially since some of these are duplicate pages. So,
Oh, that's true. We're flying through them. Okay, I
Okay.
guess I have the next one, and it's to Judge Wheeler.
Mhm.
I knew of Dan Markel long before I ever met him. As a law student, I loved reading legal blogs, and Prof's blog, which Dan founded, was one of my favorites. It was pure chance that led me to meet the man behind the blog. I applied to many law schools, and I had no special reason to think I would end up at FSU. But when I was invited down for an interview, Danny was part of the crew that took me out for a welcoming dinner. We got along well from the start. Both of us were more extroverted than the typical academic, and I found him very easy to talk to. The next day, when I presented my work to the faculty, Danny was first out of the gate with a series of sharp questions when the Q&A period started. His combination of enthusiastic friendliness with blunt intellectual debate was delightful, and he played a significant role in convincing me that FSU would be a great place to work. Luckily, I got the job. I ended up in the office next door to Danny's, and from the start, he would pop his head in constantly to chat, especially when he smelled me making coffee. Writing law review articles can be a lonely task, but Dan made it his mission to counteract that, not just for himself, but for anyone else in his orbit. During that first summer, he invited a group of us to come sit in an empty classroom that we used as a sort of writer's retreat. He framed this as a procrastination avoidance tool, and we would start a 1 hour timer and turn off our Wi Fi and commit to getting words onto electronic paper until the timer ran out. But the sessions were valuable for more than just defeating writer's block. During breaks, Dan and I would chat about everything from our personal histories to his suggestions for how to flourish in academia. Dan and I hung out regularly after that, both during and after work. 1 year into our friendship, he left for one of his many trips to present his work at another university. He came back to discover that his wife, Wendy, had stripped the house bare, taken their sons to an unknown location, and left divorce papers behind. To hear him tell it, her actions came as a total shock. He was powerfully anguished to not know where his children were or when he would get to see them again. Now, for the first time, I found myself trying to return the favor for all the support Dan had given me in my first year in Florida. Sometimes that involved long conversations about what was happening. At other times, it involved doing my best to distract him by drawing him into conversations about ideas in our fields. Sometimes it just involved drinking bourbon and watching movies together. As Dan navigated that ugly divorce, I was constantly struck by how much energy he still had for looking after others' needs. He still went out of his way to see how I was doing and to encourage my fledgling career as a scholar. It was also during that time that I came to appreciate what a loving and committed father he was. One of the things that tore him up inside was the possibility of losing time with his children, and the bitterest aspect of the divorce proceedings came when Wendy tried to get sole custody. We didn't have kids of our own yet, but Danny would have us over on his days with the boys, acting as if we had always been part of the family. I was struck by the intense love he showed for them and his automatic assumption that anyone who met them would love them just as much. I've made friends with other people at work, but Danny was by far the quickest to ask me to read stories to his kids. Many of my favorite memories of Dan came from his last year of life. I remember his nervousness about the prospect of trying to find someone new after his previous relationship had ended so badly, and then the way he slowly seemed to come alive again as he found a new girlfriend. I remember his excitement about a new paper he was working on, in which he was exploring whether the modern resurgence of discretionary sentencing had undermined fundamental principles of equality and justice in the criminal process. I had a heart attack that year, and I remember how he showered us with company and food as I was recovering, refusing to take no for an answer. I remember the last time we talked, laughing over beers on a warm summer evening as we chatted about work, kids, relationships, and many other things. I also remember the last time I saw him alive. I learned that Danny had been shot in the head on a Friday evening, and I rushed with my wife to the hospital. A friend told us that he was not expected to recover. His head was so thoroughly wrapped in bandages that his face was completely hidden, with just a bit of his hair poking out from the side. I held his hand and I wept for my friend. I could not understand how someone could take him from this world, from his friends, and most of all, from his children. Danny devoted his professional life to trying to understand the concept of justice. To the very bottom of my heart, I hope that his killers receive that justice. Emily Spotswood. Wow.
Wow. Well, this is great to hear that she was there to hold his hand while he was in hospital.
Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody was
Because
there.
before I remember just hearing about, I think it was Jeremy Cohen and his wife went to the hospital. Yeah. So, I guess it's good that there were other people there
Someone that's
too.
holding his hand. Yeah.
He
Right.
wasn't completely alone. Yeah. Mhm.
I bet there were even more. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Because he had so many friends there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And news travels fast,
Mhm.
Yeah.
like that. It was all over the news. I remember hearing about it in San Diego, like here on the national
Wow.
news. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
glad that there was
That's how.
news out there.
Oh yeah. I thought it was the national news. It could have been on YouTube, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't because I don't think I was even looking at YouTube back then. I think it was the national news.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Dawn, did you first hear about this case just through the internet?
Well, I mean, I remember hearing about it on some form of news and then thinking, oh, that's weird. Like, what's that all about?
Right.
That just seems really weird. And then when I started getting on YouTube for things, it was through James, through Mentor Lawyer. He'd be talking, he'd be in a yard or on a playground or whatever, talking about this case, and I was like, I know that guy. I know what he's talking about, and I just followed him from that. I mean, that was way, way, way back before trials and anything. And then I watched, all the trials, of course, and yeah, so it was definitely through James on YouTube, for sure.
And there were so many years of frustration when it seemed like
Yes.
nothing was happening too.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if he started talking about it after the first arrests. Do you know if he was
I'm
talking
not
about
sure.
it
I
before?
ask him, but I'm pretty sure he was covering the case back in like 2019.
Yeah,
2019,
yeah. I was
2020.
following him then for
Yeah,
sure.
because that's when the first trials happened,
Right.
2019.
And I remember the police interview and being like, because I think that was the first police interview I'd ever seen was Wendy Adelson's.
Yeah, same
And then
here.
I
Well,
asked him, and he gave me permission to go through it on my channel later on, just like with a friend, and we just went through and reacted to it. It was like 10 episodes because it was 5 hours or so. But yeah, it was largely through James, and then yeah, and still, I mean, he's the most well, of course, it would have mattered to him. It was an attorney. It was here in Tallahassee where he lived, so it meant a lot to him, the case.
mhm.
So even probably before it went to trial, but I think he started covering it more diligently, I would guess when there were some arrests, because until
Mhm.
then, nobody knew what happened.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right. Yeah, so big thanks to him because, if he
Yes.
hadn't got the police interviews, especially of Wendy and
Yeah.
all this trial footage and
Mm-hmm.
depositions, it's just really incredible how much information is available now thanks to YouTube and people like
Yeah.
him who will
Mm-hmm.
get that info.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's next? Is it
Um, Pa- I
I
think
think
I went for
Debbie.
Patty. Yeah,
Patty?
I
I
think.
I think I just went, but
Oh,
I
did you
don't
just
care.
go?
I go. I think I just went, and then so it'd be Ben.
Oh, it's
Oh,
back
There
to
you go.
me. Okay.
okay, Ben. Thank you. Go
All
ahead.
right.
We're almost done. Thank you
We're
so
almost
much.
there. Yeah.
Okay. To the Honorable Stephen Everett.
Oh,
I
this is
met
for me.
I met Danny in 1997 when I arrived in Israel for a year-long fellowship program. Danny was an alum of the program and returned to Israel to visit. He introduced me to his favorite cafe and he lent me advice about adjusting to living in this new place. Many of Danny's friends talk about how when they first met, he led with a posture of close friendship unless given reason otherwise. Danny would ask about your past experiences, about your dreams and your wishes for the future. And this is how Danny and I would first became friends. Our friendship grew in the ensuing 17 years despite not living in the same city. While he was living in Washington, D.C. and Florida, he would be in touch when visiting New York or Massachusetts, where I was living. He has somehow always managed to fit a visit into his busy travel schedule, and he always game to join me, no matter where I was at or what I was doing. At some point, a number of years elapsed without seeing each other, but Danny picked up as if no time was lost. He was incredibly attuned to when you might need a friend or want an ear, and made himself available irrespective of distance or competing demands. The skill at cultivating friendships across the globe and then connecting his friends to each other is why he's been referred to as the great connector or the internet before the internet was invented. Danny was a scholar both professionally and in personal interactions. He was a seeker of truth and justice. He was profoundly insightful and loved a good debate. He was blunt and straightforward about his thoughts, irrespective of whether a topic was controversial, and didn't shy away from hearing a difficult truth. But as much as he challenged you intellectually, he would equally challenge you to grow emotionally and be the best person you could be. After admitting that I was distracted from achieving a professional goal, he insisted that I send him a check made out to my least favorite political figure that he would send in if I didn't reach my next goal in time.
That'd be hard.
Yeah. It's funny. Danny was equally courageous in expressing his emotions as he was with his ideas. He was the first to say I miss you or share his pain and seek comfort. He'd say I woke up grumpy and lonely and could use a chat with a friend right now, or
Oh,
show his unbridled joy. He brimmed with excitement over his boys' achievements, whether learning to sing a song in Yiddish or their dancing antics. At first, I was taken aback by these shows of emotion from a grown man. But I came to understand they took emotional risks that most people wouldn't dare. He had the courage to be vulnerable, and I believe that this willingness to be vulnerable is what enabled him to forge connections and to find joy in his friendships. When friends speak of Danny as a great connector, these weren't superficial connections. They almost demanded intimacy. One friend described how Danny would never be content after a quick catch up on the phone. He wanted to know what was really going on in your life. And right after Danny's passing, a friend described how Danny was just at his home putting his kids to bed with him. A far more intimate activity than the average get together between two men. This intimacy led to deep love. One of Danny's girlfriends once told me that despite her past relationship experience, she never really knew what it felt to be like. It felt she never really knew what it felt like to be loved until she met Danny.
Mhm.
I wasn't the least bit surprised. I can't think of a greater gift one person can give to another. During the couple of years before Danny was murdered, Dan and I independently went through life transitions. I was fortunate to have him as a source of support as I walked through uncertain times. They say that tough times The tough times show you who your true friends are. Danny was one of the people to whom I grew closer during this time. Just as he was unafraid to share his pain and be vulnerable, he was unafraid of my pain and treated my vulnerability with care. He saw my strengths and valued them and reminded me of them. He saw my struggles and lessened them with his company and friendship. One of my emails to him during this time said, "Hanging out tonight brought me joy, a feeling that has been hard to access lately." I also had the privilege of being in Danny's life as he confronted his own challenges. As they say, the true test of a person's character is how they respond to difficulty. Danny would share the details of a tough situation with stark honesty, and he wanted to find a fair solution. But then the conversation would often follow with a discussion about how he could respond in the most humane way possible. He said he wanted to choose actions that would make his sons proud. Amidst disappointment, he sought out a path of kindness and peace. He had great capacity for taking responsibility for his mistakes and for forgiving others' mistakes. He wanted to talk about cultivating a heart of loving kindness, particularly in light of our shared interest in Buddhist teachings. Danny also never lost sight of the gifts in his life. He expressed gratitude for a career that he loved and that allowed him to care for his family, and gratitude for his friends and family and for the communities he was part of, and perhaps most of all for his little wonder balls, the word he used to refer to his two sons. Danny's passing has left me bereft. I instinctively turned to my phone to call Danny when there's a piece of news in my life. I miss his famous Bam Bizzle birthday wishes and his Facebook post excitedly displaying his boys' art projects and soccer videos. I still feel the desire for him to weigh in with his advice when facing a decision. I miss his work trips, which enabled our visits. I miss the authenticity he brought to our friendship and the way he encouraged me to grow. I can think of no better way to love someone than to encourage the growth. I try to honor Danny by remembering what he said at the conclusion of one of his email messages, which now seems precision. Everything wonderful is also and already fragile. Love mightily while you can. I love and miss Danny. Real friends are a rare gift. With tears flowing from my eyes as I write this, the pain of his loss still cuts deep. The type of pain that does not heal, and I feel profound sadness and anger that this dear friend was senselessly taken from me, from his boys, from his family, from his academic community, and from our shared community of friends. I never stop wishing that my friend were still here. Sincerely, Tamar Menzel.
Oh, that is so heartfelt. And
Yeah.
anytime I hear about like Dan's previous girlfriends or something, I
Yeah.
just think like, wow, imagine if he had married someone else, like someone who actually appreciated him and didn't come from such a psycho crazy family.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Mm.
There's still part of me that wonders if, in addition to all of the motivation for what was laid out in the trial as to why this happened, why the Adelsons wanted to do away with Danny, I just felt like there was jealousy on Wendy's
Yeah.
part of
Mhm.
Yeah.
of Amy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And that might have been, the one thing that pushed her over the edge to, if she was involved.
Starting at their very wedding when Dan had to tell his friends, please don't mention Harvard in their little speeches.
Right.
Because Wendy's
Yeah.
jealous.
That is
Right.
so stupid. You would think they would be proud of him.
Right.
But
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
then it seemed like Wendy's parents and Charlie, they were so protective of Wendy that they believed whatever stuff she would then say about him.
Right.
So,
Right.
she was the little princess who had to be protected, and it was all
Yeah.
Dan's fault. It was all Gibbers' fault, and she had nothing to do with the relationship breakdown, right? So,
Right. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Mm.
Well, the last one is from Tamara Demko, Dan's friend. And yeah, and this was written for the Charles Adelson trial, the sentencing, I would
okay.
guess.
Yeah.
To the Honorable Stephen Everett. I met Dan Markel on my first day at Harvard Law School in 1997. We were assigned to the same small group and quickly became friends. Danny was one of my oldest friends, close from the first days in Cambridge to the last several years preceding his death when we both lived in Tallahassee. He was my classmate, my dance partner, my constant, my advisor, my confidant, my dear friend. We shared past, present, and future. A classmate remembered Danny and I becoming fast friends in our first week of law school. Quote, "You were like two pieces of the same puzzle finally reunited," end quote. Until his death, through loves and losses, children, distance, and closeness, that remained true for us. We loved and supported each other. He was a blessing in my life. From many walks around Harvard Square and Tallahassee's Lake Ella to nights of music and dinners wherever we happened to be in the U.S., intellectual discourse and debate, discussions of Judaism, meeting up for our children to play together, and countless hours sharing our deepest truths and understandings over meals on the phone or at his home. He was my dear, beloved friend. We watched each other grow and evolve over the years, providing each other advice and encouragement. He lived every moment with joy, and he loved mightily. When Danny was killed, there was a tremendous outpouring of grief, love, and support from friends, families, colleagues, students, and communities, not only in Tallahassee, where he lived, in New York, where he often traveled, or at Harvard, where he attended college and law school, but from across the nation, Canada, Israel, and around the world. Even today, people continue to speak of his life and how he personally touched and changed their lives. His voice, his hugs, his heart are missed beyond description. How could one man have had such an impact on so many? He was not an actor, politician, or preacher. How could so many feel his loss so deeply? His colleagues and students deeply respected him. His family and extended family of friends loved him unconditionally for the unique, genuine, witty, brilliantly sarcastic, loving, affectionate, intelligent, sometimes goofy, empathetic, kind, and adventurous soul that he was. He was indeed a prolific writer, a brilliant mind, an innovative scholar, professor, mensch, and a friend who was devoted to his family and faith community. His contributions to the legal and academic communities are well documented in more than 30 published articles in his writings and commentaries on Prof's blog, and in the minds and hearts of the countless colleagues and students he inspired and influenced over the years, whether as a leader at Harvard Hillel, a resident tutor at Lowell House during law school days, a traveling fellow and scholar, or a professor of law at Florida State University. Jewish or not, if you were within traveling radius and a Shabbat dinner or any dinner was to be had, you were invited to join Danny. Despite very diverse circles of friends across the world, he managed to be there for his friends. He had been referred to as the Great Connector, an internet before there was an internet. He has also been referred to as the Johnny Carson of academics, inviting you to the stage and then encouraging and inspiring you to reach new personal levels. He has been called a collector of people, the kind of friend who you could not speak to in years, and in a moment of contact, you picked up exactly where you left off. He was quick to foster your potential, to challenge you toward your best, to support you through the best and worst of times. Danny was a seeker of truth and justice, an exceedingly insightful man, unafraid to hear and believe the hardest of truths, unafraid to tell you what he was thinking, unafraid to love and support his friends, unafraid to show emotion or ask for help. He was truly a man of wisdom and discernment. He cared about you, and he was fully present whenever he was with you. He easily created an emotional intimacy that led to deep personal connections. He had a dozen nicknames in terms of endearment for those he loved. I feel like I'm reading that other person's letter. Did I get mixed up? Didn't that sound like the other person's letter? I think that one got
No.
inserted. No,
No,
or
it's
was it,
similar.
This is
or she said similar things. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
This
sorry
is
about that. Okay. So endearment for he had terms of endearment for those he loved. Danny's heart was his boys and his little bears, delicious ones and wonder balls and magical ones. He was in awe of them. He loved teaching them about his deep faith, tradition, ritual, and importance of community, family, and friends. He was a shamelessly proud and involved father from their birth until his death and every single moment in between. Danny glowed with love and pride in his boys. As someone who appreciated fine art, Danny found no art better than that of his sons, and their artwork was frequently displayed throughout his house. As a music lover, Danny found no sound sweeter than that of his boys singing. Whatever he could, he would go to preschool just to share a snack with them. He was one of the best fathers you could ever meet, and his boys deserve to know him. On a personal level, having experienced both the murder of a close childhood friend in 1982 and a personal violence as an adult, I was cut to the core by Danny's murder. It tore open old wounds and removed any sense of peace or safety I had struggled to rebuild. He believed in me and supported me in healing from trauma when others did not. He was a comfort, a shelter in the storms of life, a place of refuge. His needless death left me without a safe haven and tore a hole in my heart. The month before he died, he took me out to dinner for my birthday, and we shared our latest hopes and dreams. His violent loss was jarring. The knowledge that while I was working less than 2 miles away, my beloved friend had been gunned down in the supposed safety of his home garage was heartbreaking. My beloved friend had been gunned down It also meant that the house where I had spent many hours with my friend, where I had felt loved and understood, now felt tainted and unsafe. Indeed, safety was an illusion if in broad daylight such a monstrous crime could occur. Every new detail of his murder added to painful disbelief and a loss of ability to trust those once thought known. My children cried when I told them what happened. Having to explain to my children that Danny was murdered in the house where they had played with his children was unthinkable. Tallahassee itself has become associated with a lack of safety and peace for our family, and we moved from the area soon after his loss, never wishing to return. Watching their mother grieve deeply affected my children greatly. Danny's loss continues to deeply affect his family and friends around the world. It impacted the Tallahassee community, the state of Florida, and the nation. The callous disregard for life and cold calculation of his murder, in addition to those long 9 years waiting for everyone involved to be brought to justice, have left family and friends grieving indefinitely with an open wound, seekers of justice disheartened, and shocked members of the public yearning for the full truth, so that such a self-serving, premeditated, heinous act will never be viewed as inconsequential and repeated. No combination of words, however eloquent, can fully capture Danny's spirit, can fully convey his passion for life, can adequately pay him full tribute. Danny gave a little bit of himself to everyone he touched, and he remains a blessing in their hearts. His memory brings joy, peace, and healing. Danny was a dear friend to so many and to me. I love him always. I will miss him forever. For all who knew him, his loss leaves a void that cannot be filled. Dan Markel was simply irreplaceable. Sincerely, Tamara Demko.
So Tamara was there at the last couple of trials, probably in some of the first trials too.
Yeah.
So she's a very good friend of his.
Yeah, she was at
Yeah.
Donna's trial.
Mhm. Yeah, and Charlie's too, because I
Right.
met her briefly there. So
Oh.
really very emotionally touched by Danny's passing. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well,
So
that's was maybe good for her. It might have been hard because she said she didn't want to come back to Tallahassee, but then to go to the murder trial, it might
Mhm.
have been a little bit of a therapeutic in a way to
Yeah.
face it. Yeah.
But she had to see Donna and Harvey too. You know,
Right.
the last time she
Right.
saw Harvey, she just kind of felt scared and got
Yeah.
these really creepy vibes that
Went out and
Yeah.
bought a
had
gun,
She
something
knew.
to do
moved
with it.
away.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
people who are victim of crimes like she is have a high, oftentimes a heightened sense of like when somebody's not right and to get away from them and
Yeah.
it's really encouraged to follow that. Even, don't let people say, "Oh, you're just being silly" or whatever, so
Yeah.
she probably was really tuned into that energy.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, this has taken quite a long time, so I
Yes.
really appreciate you guys having
It's
the
okay.
stamina. I kind of feel like up and moving around now after sitting
I
in
know.
one.
Yeah.
I've been wiggling. I hope I wasn't wiggling too much. I'm
No,
uncomfortable.
no,
What a
you're
great
fine.
tribute, though.
I
12 years today that he died, and what a great tribute to read these letters. Like,
Yeah.
what an
what a great
amazing
idea.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy, for
Sure.
doing this.
Well, Ben, I don't know if you can answer this. What does this mean? Was Dan a Shomer
Shomer
Shabbat?
Shabbat. It means Shabbat has a lot of, depending on your level of orthodoxy, there's different restrictions. So some people, there's going to synagogue for services, there's having Shabbat dinners, and there's also some people, like myself, I don't use any electricity on Shabbos. I don't use my cell phone, internet. We don't drive. So it's depending on your level of observance to it. So that's what they're asking.
Mm.
So I don't know where he was at with that. I don't know.
What
I don't
level?
think so because I feel like Wendy and Donna would have
Brought
picked
that
on
up.
him for that. They
Yeah.
picked on him wanting to take the kids to shul. So
Right.
I think they were saying that he was becoming more and more religious throughout the years, and I think that
Mhm.
was one of the things that
Yeah.
the Adelsons couldn't stand so much, was that he was becoming more religious, and it really bothered them.
or he kept kosher. I don't know,
Yeah.
but maybe he was already like that when he and Wendy dated, though. So
Yeah.
we can only hear what Wendy and her family said about him. So
Oh,
Right.
that's true.
who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what they discussed when they decided to get
Yeah.
married? Because she was on J-Date, so she was presenting herself as someone who was sort of, proud of her roots and
Mhm.
Yeah.
sort of observant, maybe.
Yeah, but
Jewish-ish.
there's all, yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of, a spectrum of how the level of observance different people
Mhm.
tap into. But
Donna had said to Wendy in an email, if this goes on with Dan and how religious he is, she says at some point you're going to be the one outside of the circle because you aren't as attuned to the religion, meaning that Dan and the boys would have her shut out because she didn't participate on I don't know the Jewish
Yeah,
word,
because
but
she didn't have a kosher kitchen,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
she wasn't going to the same synagogue
then-
anymore.
and then dressing the kids, saying, "Oh, we're going to dress the kids up as Nazis," is just
Well, that was like Donna just giving an example, like if you dressed up your kids in the Hitler Youth
it's like, what
uniforms and
is-
brought them down here, I couldn't
disgusting.
care.
say though, yeah.
She wanted to manipulate Dan
Yeah.
as long as they could convince him somehow to let go of the kids and let Wendy move away with them.
And
Mhm.
Dawn, your theory, or you're saying about how the Adelsons couldn't stand Dan because he was just so good, in contrast to them. I think
Yeah.
that premise also applied to Robert. He got
Yeah.
shut out too because he was just,
Right.
Yeah,
too
yeah.
good,
Yeah.
too honest.
Poor
Mhm.
Robert. Gosh.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true that Donna was helping to cherry
Yeah.
pick the best person for her precious little
Yeah.
princess And Dan looked great on paper because he went to Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School. He was
Right.
working for a law firm back then. Yeah.
Right. But then they ended up resenting him for those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
Exactly.
the irony. Robert's wife wasn't Jewish enough, and Wendy's husband was too Jewish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you can't please
Yeah.
these crazy
Yeah.
people.
That's
But
right.
if it makes their precious child upset, then that person needs to be annihilated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about them. It was just about them themselves.
Right.
It wasn't about-
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
pretty awful. Well, I do have to get going. Tomorrow's another busy work day and stuff. And I know you
Yes.
guys have stuff going on too. Ben, you told me you had a lot of work deadlines. So
It was, yeah, it was one of the crazy, nothing slowed down in the summer. It's just been
Mm.
crazy. But
I'm
Yeah.
gonna find your channel, Ben. I want to hear your shows about the Adelsons, especially.
Oh, you haven't heard?
No, I
Thank
haven't.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Yeah. You'll
well,
enjoy.
Mia has been great
Well,
about
thanks.
Thank
dropping,
you,
Oh, thank
Mia.
you. Thank you,
Yes.
Mia.
everyone. Yeah, so
Mamma
Ben's
mia.
channel, it's called Attorney Ben now, isn't it?
yes.
Okay.
Rebranding.
Yeah,
Okay.
just at Attorney Ben.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's not bankruptcy with Ben anymore. Okay.
Yeah, going through some rebranding, playing around. We'll see where things
Mhm.
go.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I
Thank
did
you,
watch
Judy.
your I watched
Thank
your
you for
latest
letting me
video.
be a part of this. It meant a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
thank
well,
you. Thank you for
thank
joining
for
us. It's-
participating and stuff. So guys, please
Yeah.
check out Don DeKisto, Attorney Ben, and Patty N1032 for some more Adelson, Dan Markel type content and other topics. Yeah. So we'll be in touch. Hopefully we'll all come
Yeah.
back again for something else, especially
Yeah.
when
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
gets
Something-
arrested. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For
Yeah.
that, as Georgia Kaplan said, the Markels deserve 100%, not 90%
Yeah.
justice. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Thank you guys in the chat. Really appreciate all your comments and Mia being a great moderator.
thank you,
Yeah.
Mia.
Can you
Yes.
believe somebody jumped in and
Yeah.
said Patty and I were just doing this for profit or profiting off of Dan's murder?
Oh
So
gosh.
if only you knew how much time we have all put into our
Yeah.
channels and
Who said
how
that?
little.
You mean it's a troll?
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah, I think the troll is gone now, and somebody called us a bunch of overly emotional weirdos. So
Well, I'm glad you thought of this, Judy, and invited me
Yeah.
because it really is quite, because when we watch trials, we get into all the legal stuff and all the this and that and the details of the crime and what was going on, with the people that are on trial, because that's what we were presented with, that evidence. But this was really a nice way to, I don't know, show some respect for in this
Yeah.
case, Dan and all of the people who loved him. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
to remember the victim as a real person, and he's not just a FSU law professor who was
Yeah.
killed. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
thanks,
Right.
Julia. Thanks, Top Cat.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate you guys. Okay, well, have a good night then. We'll
All
be in
right.
touch soon.
Good night.
Okay,
Bye,
thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
everybody.
chat.
Great to
Thank
see you.
you.